Oh, this is Karen Laughlin. Oop. Hi, this is Karen Laughlin with ECAC. I'm a parent educator here. I'm joined by Andrea Young, and we want to welcome you to Tool Time Tuesday on April 2nd, which is hard to believe it's already April. But come on in as you get settled. We're happy to have you. And I would like to let you know that we advertise this one as come and learn some questions from the parent educator, which is me, but also from each other. So we'll be using chat actively today. If you wouldn't mind, I'll be asking for, your ideas and thoughts and example questions, things like that throughout the half hour today. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Karen Laughlin. I'm a parent educator with ECAC. Been here, oh gosh, most of the last 12 years. And I started with IEP meetings at a maybe a slightly unusual time, which was when my daughter Carly went into high school. So I had a lot of questions, but I didn't always have the confidence to ask them. So this topic's become a really important one to me. What are the questions and why should you ask them? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're happy to have you here. I figure out how to get the slides to move. It's always tricky at first. Okay, what makes asking questions important? I think we know that parents are required members of their kids' IEP teams. And a lot of times I know parents spend a lot of time thinking about what they want to say, to other team members. But let's think about why we ask questions. What are some of your thoughts about the reasons that questions are important when you're dealing with school folks, especially in meetings? Andrea, do you mind doing the chat piece of this, or you want me to do it?
Oh, I can monitor it.
Okay. Why is it important to ask questions? What do you think? No, we've got one in chat and one in Q&A. So then, thank you for that. What do we got there, Andrea?
Questions are important to ensure that you have a clear understanding of the process.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Well, let me show a list about why we ask questions. See if this gets you thinking about any other reasons that questions are important. And we do have our number 2 point here is just what we heard: to eliminate confusion or misunderstanding. You do want to ask questions and make sure you're understanding correctly what's going on. So right above that, if you ask questions, you have an opportunity to learn. You can learn other people's perspectives. You can learn about parts of a special ed process or special education that you're not familiar with yet. You can learn what other people are thinking. So that's our 3rd point: to better understand other people's perspectives. If you think about an IEP team, there are a lot of experts there, including parents as experts in their children, and a lot of other experts. So to understand what they know, where they're coming from, is a really good reason to ask a question. To stimulate creativity and ideas. I don't know if you typically would think of an IEP meeting as a real creative place, but it absolutely can be. Some of the best IEP meetings are about, well, what else could we try? What are some other ideas? What is a new thing we might try? So creativity and ideas. You don't ask questions about whether other people are thinking or about other options, you could be missing that opportunity. Questions to solve a problem. And we can ask questions to try to reach agreement or to figure out where exactly are we stuck as we agree to disagree. So we're going to give some examples of questions in each of these categories. And as we do that, I'm sure some of you have ideas and examples from your own experiences that we could all benefit from hearing. So let's use the chat for that as we go along. So these are some of the reasons to ask questions. There are also kind of some reasons not to ask questions sometimes, or to ask a certain type of question, which might include kind of questions that might be a way we're expressing some of our more negative feelings. So we want to stay in these zone here. We don't want to ask questions that put people on the spot. We don't want to ask questions to let off anger or frustration necessarily. There are typically more productive ways to do that. And so as you're thinking about questions you might want to ask, just be clear on your intent and your motives. And try to stay in these zones here. I think when you're in this area of questions, there are not bad questions, but there are other sorts of questions that probably are just not productive in a meeting. All right, I feel like this reminds me of something like Greek philosophy or something, like first yourself. So as you're preparing, so it says there before an IEP meeting, as you're preparing, ask yourself some questions. What are you most concerned about right now? What are the key issues you're hearing about from your child, or from their report cards, or from their conversations with teachers, from progress reports? What is most front and center on your mind? What are you looking for your child to accomplish? If you're preparing for an IEP meeting, then you're thinking about a calendar year, typically. Although that's a little awkward sometimes because that would involve a change of grade level. But, think about immediate short term and kind of medium, longer term. What are you looking for your child to achieve in specifics to the degree that you can? What might help? If you have some ideas about what might help, go ahead and get those maybe jotted down. And always want to ground yourself, especially as your kids get older. What are you looking for their future? Their education is not just about the years they're in school. Those are certainly important years, but it's about the rest of their lives too, as they leave school and are entering the adult version of their life. So you want to stay really grounded there. What is your vision? Has it shifted a little bit in the last year, if you haven't met in a while? What are you thinking you'd like to see happen? What are they saying? What is your child saying about all these things? So first ask yourself some questions, and maybe review some documentation and things like that to get ready for a meeting. And then you can start asking some questions behind the scenes as the meeting's getting scheduled, that date's approaching. This is just a handful of questions that we tend to talk about when we speak with parents on the phone, or when we communicate by email, that we think have been helpful. Also, as I've been saying, like to hear what you all think. So before a meeting, things you can ask your team, typically in writing, so that it becomes kind of official. When can I receive the data we're going to cover in this meeting, and a copy of the proposed IEP? So predetermination is not okay, but creating a draft IEP, often I see them, they're stamped proposed all over the place, is a time saver. And receiving all that information ahead of time, I think, is one of the most important advocacy tips for parents. So this is your question: when can I receive that? Ideally, you want it a couple days ahead of time, so that you can review it yourself and ask others what they think. And then you might want to go to question number 2: who can help me once I've received the data if I'm not understanding it all? So questions about data, you're going to see a mention of that a lot in this presentation, because data-based decision-making is what IEP teams do. And to be a true effective IEP team member, you need to understand the data. That doesn't come naturally to all of us. I'm not a numbers person myself, so my question is always going to be, about context. Can I understand this data? Can you explain it to me in a different way that maybe involves more words and less numbers? But that's just me. Some of you are great with numbers, but there ought to be context around any data you receive, and it should be understandable to you so that you can participate in conversations about it. How will we handle the prior written notice? You could also ask about meeting minutes. Will somebody be taking minutes? How will we handle the prior written notice? If you'd like to participate in that, we don't always know ahead of time as parents who's doing what in the room or in the Zoom squares. So it is important to ask about that. The prior written notice is a summary of decisions made in an IEP meeting, how they were made, and what kind of also what decisions were not made. So it's an important document. And you can ask questions about how that'll be done if you have interest or concern for how that document is going to be handled. And you know, there are different reasons, which is actually a whole nother webinar about when do parents have more or less concern about the prior written notice. But I just wanted to highlight that. Also before the meeting, how are we gonna, what about my kid? Can they come? Sometimes as children get older, they can even lead their own IEP meetings. They can submit their questions ahead of time. They can share their concerns. There are lots and lots of ways to get kids involved in ways that work for them. And there are lots of ways. There may be a time where you're thinking, well, that first half hour, I don't want that, but I want a special moment where they come in and they do their part. So you can ask questions about that. I would really love it if anybody has any other ideas for questions that you could ask your IEP team as you're preparing for a meeting. Whether it was your request or whether it's just because it's time, because it's annual, or whether you've been asked to come on in for a meeting. What would be some questions you'd like to suggest to our other listeners? We've got about 25 people here, so let's share our ideas with each other. We'll wait a little bit of typing here.
Who will be present at the meeting?
Right, and that should be on your invitation. But if you want to clarify, or if you didn't receive the written invitation, you absolutely want to ask for that. But if you are not clear or there are not people listed, then absolutely that's a good question. What else? Do we have anybody else?
Anything else right now?
Some related questions about who will be there is, who is, is this the, for example, a special ed teacher, if you don't recognize the name on your invitation, is this a person who works with my child? What is the relationship of these folks that are listed to my child? Ideally, parents want to get people that are the closest, right? And we don't want, just a person in the slot if the person that's closest to the child can be there. All right. Looks like, oh, we got a couple last minute. Okay. What do we got?
You could ask if another team member could be present. For example, a teacher your child may be having difficulties with.
Yes. Yes, thank you for that. And actually, was talking with a parent recently in high school. High school, middle school is tricky because you've got so many teachers. The requirement for an IEP team might, is a teacher, but if there is a specific person, or if you feel a need for maybe half the teachers or all the teachers or the teacher in the hardest area, you can ask those things, build your team. You want to build an effective team, and you can do that by asking for other people to come. All right. Are we good there, Andrea?
We just had another person have a comment that they had their daughter participate in an IEP meeting. By having her demonstrate her abilities. She has learned quite a bit of Spanish, and when they started the meeting, she had her show her skills, and because mom had concerns with her school, wanted to show her capacity for learning and retaining information.
Really good idea. Thank you for that. All right, during the meeting, somebody mentioned earlier on, you want to ask questions so you understand what is happening. And so these are kind of versions of the biggest question, which is, what did you just say? I want to be really sure you're understanding. So you can say, let me make sure I understand it. You just say this and summarize. You can ask for clarity. You can ask for acronyms to be explained. Asking questions during a meeting to make sure you're following. Please tell yourself over and over, this is how I advocate for my child. It's okay to not understand everything. It's okay to have questions. It is not as good for your child if you don't want to be embarrassed or feel too shy to ask the questions. So please work on this. And getting a whole room full of people on the same page, you're not going to be the only one that's going to appreciate it if you ask for some clarity. So there are many variations of the question. This is just a couple specific examples. What do we do there? There we go. Got a couple slides worth of questions, kind of helping parents visualize or understand better what decisions are really being made. Sometimes how are the decisions being made? So these are just kind of an assortment, and some of you might have some other ideas. I think a really good one is, what will that look like in the classroom? It's really good for everybody on the team to hear just a little bit about instruction. Sometimes this is a question that you can hit on briefly in a meeting and then kind of flesh out more in detail in a different kind of conversation. If you think about IEP meetings, they don't write down a lot of detail about instruction, but that stuff can be captured in the notes. It can be something that you, as a parent, you make notes on to take home, but I think it's really important to understand what's that actually going to look like. Let's not leave with a bunch of assumptions. Let's clarify some things. What else can we try? If one option's been thrown out, what are some of the other options? What is the data show? Being able to, again, I've already mentioned, being able to ask questions and talk about data is part of being an IEP team member. And here's the one I mentioned for me, not being a numbers person. Can you put that data in some context? For example, if my child's present level in reading is, and I'm pulling this totally out of my head, a 29, can you put that in context? How does that compare to grade level standards? How does that compare to what we were hoping for in terms of progress this far along? So those kind of questions, you can really, remember we talked about, why are you asking? You're asking to learn, and you're asking to clarify, you're asking to generate good ideas, sometimes to put some creativity into the process. All right, more questions. These are a couple things about goals. Goals are certainly important because they guide instruction, and they are the basis for collecting data, and the data is the basis for decisions. So we've got some questions about goals. Why is this one relevant now and for the future? Again, we're looking at closing that gap between your child's performance and grade level. How will this goal help that? Talking about data collection. If there's not a detailed discussion of data collection, or you're not tracking it well, you can ask those questions. Who's doing it, when and where? Again, with the question about instruction, what will instruction in support of this goal look like? You're not going to get, a semester so worth of curriculum, but you can get a general idea, and that might lead you to some follow-up questions down the road. And how will we receive information about progress? How often? Is there a way that I can hear a more individualized data about my child's progress? Can we think about a communication sheet or a worksheet about this new behavior plan? How will we receive information? All right, how about some other questions? Questions you've asked, questions you wish you'd asked. If you're here, anybody's here as an educator, what do you think are some good questions that our parents might ask down the road? Do these make you think of other things? I'll give you a little bit of time to share with us. I was just thinking of another one because uh, this, I know we can't cover everything, but one of the questions that has come up a lot last school year and this school year is along the lines of what will instruction look like, and who's providing it, and is that person qualified to provide this instruction? Is there any support or training that anyone working with my child might need to be able to meet their needs? That question, the question about the support and training staff need to meet the child's unique needs is on the IEP form and should be addressed in every meeting. And as a parent, you can ask more detailed questions about that. You can kind of try to get that fleshed out a little bit and make sure that that discussion actually happens. So if that's on your mind. See, we have somebody jumping in, Andrea. What do we?
We do have someone, they said, how long do you have to try other interventions before we can reassess if the child is eligible for testing to see if eligible for an IEP?
Okay. So that's a question about the at the front end of the process. It sounds like a question when you're talking about trying to get an evaluation for special education. Yeah, how long? And you know, it's a good question during the IEP process as well, is how long will we try this before we will be able to tell if it's effective or not? Because you know, we make agreements and decisions in meetings. That doesn't mean we're getting it completely right. So how will we know? When can we come together again to talk about if the decisions we've made today are effective? Things like that. All right. We're going to shift to after, because once you have left an IEP meeting and there's new agreements, it is really smart to not wait a year to keep track of what's going on. If you, for example, agreed to new accommodations, you have a good way to kind of check in with the teachers and say, hey, are those working out the way that we hope they would? We planned this accommodation to meet this need. How's that going? It's a really nice casual way to kind of drop in on a teacher and just check in with and see what they think. It also serves as a little gentle reminder that there's something new that's supposed to be in place every day. Similar thing with if there are new goals or new instruction being provided. Can you share an example? How's it going? We talked about you providing instruction in this area in this way. How's that seemingly working out? And again, you can be asking the similar questions of your kids to the level that they're able. See what they think of any changes that were agreed to. You have an opportunity to ask for data along the way, as opposed to how's it going, and the answer is great. You can say, may I see the data that you've been collecting? And that way, you know, you're in the loop. You kind of want to be in the loop as much as you think you want to be, as much as you think you need to be. So these are the kind of how's it going. Remember those things we talked about questions. These are really good to ask also of IEP team members who were not present. As we talked about earlier, you don't always have every teacher or every teacher assistant are hardly ever in meetings. So it is a really nice way to be able to kind of drop a note and say, hey, I just want to make sure that you understand the accommodations that the team agreed to. Here's the ones that I recall. How's it going with these? Really good way to just loop people in and keep the communication coming. There is a question at the bottom I think is always important. How can I support my child's education at home? Well, how can I help? How can I be a part of their education in an ongoing way? You could also throw in there, like, do you need any supplies for that party that's coming up? Or are you out of Kleenex? It's spring. Any way you can help support a teacher's efforts is always greatly appreciated. But you also want to be receiving, if the teachers can, if you ask a question, they can say to you, well, was kind of struggling with pronouncing a specific word yesterday. Maybe you could just work on that a little bit this week. Really make a good commitment to your child's education that way. So afterwards, this kind of just keeps rolling. You keep in touch, you're monitoring progress. You can ask questions about progress reports when they come back, things like that. I see we've got a couple of things in Q&A, and then we do want to leave time for our poll. So why don't we take those, Andrea, and then launch the poll after that.
Well, someone had the question of what other way can I know if my child is eligible for an IEP?
So again, somebody here, or maybe a couple of somebodies are kind of at the beginning of the process, which is kind of a different topic. Andrea, why don't you, if you don't mind, popping my email in the chat, and if anybody wants to email directly and say I was the person with, asking those questions, be happy to. We have tons of information we could send about, the beginning of the whole process and how to participate in that, which is kind of what you're asking. How do I participate in that? How do I ask those questions? All right. Any other ideas about questions after an IEP meeting, or any other thoughts that have come up along the way?
One person says, how do I phrase the question without being offensive if I have been made aware that the person working with my child is not trained to work with their needs?
Right. That's nice to be thoughtful of your tone and things. I think that might go back to the general question of how can we support this teacher? How can the school, the district, even if we need, even if the school district needs to reach into the community, how can we provide the training and support that this teacher needs to be effective with my child? Can we get together and talk about this? Or, things like that. Who in the district can I talk to about this? And that is an ongoing real thing that's been happening. So thank you for asking about that. That's a good thing to pay attention to.
There's another more specific question, I'm not sure, kind of on the same topic. And I had to do a Google Translate. So they had asked what to do when the school diagnosis is different from the hospital diagnosis.
I think that's a question about data. Can we talk about can we talk about these differences? Can we compare the data? And that is a much broader question also. So again, if we might put a bilingual parent educator in the chat box or an email, if that would be helpful, because the whole issue of the role of a medical diagnosis in the education system is a big question. Any other suggestions for questions that parents think are good, effective things to ask before, during our meetings?
Anything else coming in?
Anybody if this is stirring up questions, please know that you can contact ECAC. There's a contact us link from the front page of our website. And Andrea can put our website in the chat. And if you know, sometimes people leave these little short sessions with more questions than when they started. If you like individual assistance, please let us know that. Otherwise, I hope these questions were helpful. I am a little concerned about shutting down. We've got I'm looking at 15 in the chat. But why do we do this? Let's pop up our poll so we can let everybody do that. And then if you can stay a few more minutes, we can address some of your concerns. But I given that it was posted for 12 to 12:30, I would like to do the poll and end officially, and then we can stay a little bit longer for people that are, if you can, we can.
We have another person that wrote a question about that would be good to ask, how can we meet my child where she is? That seems to help open discussion.
Yeah, nice. Like that. That sounds like specially designed instruction, right? The meeting them where they are so that they can move forward.
And we have another person asking, they're relocating from Florida to North Carolina. They want to know how the IEP, they would like to have the IEP transferred before the next school year, and they're not sure of those steps.
Okay. Why don't we do this? How's our poll percentages, Andrea? Are we good?
13 out of 25. Keep there, a few more coming in. You add the form on our website to contact us in 1 second.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be great. Sometimes there's so much more to talk about most of the time. So these are some questions you can ask before, during, and after. If you like the idea of a more personalized approach, Andrea's putting our information in the chat. Please do reach out. Our parent educators, happy to talk with you, share email with you, provide you other things you can read or videos about how this all works. We've got so many resources we'd love to share with you. If anyone has something real specific that could take a few minutes and you want to stay after, I'm happy to hang here a little bit, but I think we can end the recording and consider this closed for Tool Time Tuesday for today. Andrea, you want to preview the topics for the upcoming Tuesdays?
Yes, so I was just going to tell everyone about next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we will be talking about April as month of the military child, military family. So we have 2 of our ECAC staff that will talk about that. So specifically for families in the military. So that will be next Tuesday.
All right. I think there's a lot of Tuesdays this month too, right?
All right.
So we have like 5 of these coming, or 4 more. All right. Well, thank